Then Joshua gathered all of the tribes of Israel to Shechem, and some of the elders, the heads, the judges, the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your ancestors, Terah and his sons, Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many." And now from verse 14, hear these words. "Now therefore revere the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now, if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight. He protected us along the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God." But Joshua said to the people, "You cannot serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good." And the people said to Joshua, "No, we will serve the Lord." Then Joshua said to the people, "You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him." And they said, "We are witnesses." He said, "Then put away the foreign gods that are among you and incline your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel." The people said to Joshua, "The Lord our God we will serve, and him we will obey." So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. Amen. Well, we have been looking over these last few weeks at this period of time of the Israelites moving from the period of their wilderness wandering into the time of security in the promised land. And so as we finish now the book of Joshua, remembering last week's disclaimer that in the midst of the book of Joshua we see violence and we see war and we see some even genocide, that we read this book through the lens of Christ, through the lens of peace and of turning the other cheek and loving of neighbor. And we find some incredibly helpful words that help us to understand in our world today what transition looks like. What the move from one place and one time and one moment and one year to another. And so, as we seek to be faithful to the call of our scriptures, we too today look at ways that we are going to, as the new year comes, look for God's leading and God's voice as we move from one year to another. Now, I like the way that Walter Brueggemann talks about this passages and really lays out the entirety of the history of the Israelite people beforehand. Because this, you hear in this passage that Joshua has gathered the people together once they've made it into the promised land and told them, remember all of your history. All the way back to Abraham, all the way back to the beginning. Remember all of this. And now you have a choice to make. Choose this day whom you will serve. The gods of out there, or the God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And Walter Brueggemann talks about this in a way that lays out the history of the Israelite people in a choice of two different options. The gods of scarcity, or the God Yahweh of abundance? The gods of closed fists, or the God of open hands? And Brueggemann goes back to the beginning, back to some of the earliest days as the people came to Egypt, and said that they had this choice even then. For they heard the whisperings of the God of scarcity. Through Pharaoh, the king said, no, there will come a day where we will not have enough food. And so what we need to do today, what we need to do now during this 7 years is to gather food, to hoard it. To say no to those who need it now so that I and the people I like can have it when the famine comes. We have to be afraid. We have to be careful. We have to stay in control. And out of the story of Pharaoh, out of the story of the gods of scarcity comes the story of the God of abundance, who takes the people into the desert where there is nothing and gives them quail, gives them manna, gives them water from a rock. And the God of abundance says, I will care for you. But the gods of scarcity continue to whisper. And the people of God continue to be afraid, and they look at the manna that comes on the ground and they say, yes, it's fine for today, but what happens tomorrow? What happens the next day? What happens the next week? What happens the next month? And so they started to hear these voices of scarcity and started to gather the manna and started to say, well, I don't know what's going to happen, and so we have to be afraid and gather manna for tomorrow and the next day and beyond. And what happened? It didn't work. The God of abundance laughed and said, here is your food for today. Everything you hoard for tomorrow has gone rancid, filled with maggots and wasted. I told you, says the God of abundance, I will care for you day by day by day. And then after the wilderness wandering, they move into the promised land, and they begin to move through, taking these lands and taking from those countries that are inhabiting those lands. And as they take them, the commandment from God has been to share with what has been taken, to share the spoils with everybody. But the whispers of the gods of scarcity came to a man named Achan. And Achan heard those voices and said, well, what if I don't have enough? It's fine for today, but what about tomorrow? What about the next day? And so he took some of those spoils and some of that money and he held it to himself and he hoarded it to himself. And once again, the God of abundance said, that's not the way we do things. There is enough for all. Anticipating the words of a John the Baptist who will one day say, if you have 2 coats and your neighbor has none, what's your problem? And so, the gods of scarcity continue to whisper today. The gods of scarcity continue to tell us, you're not going to have enough. There's not going to be enough. But the God of abundance said, yes, there is. I will take care of you. I have been taking care of you. And I will take care of you still. Look at what the Israelites say in response to Joshua in this call. Finally, they got it. Even after the years and decades and lifetimes of the whispering of the gods of scarcity, they finally got it, at least for this moment. For they said, it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight. He protected us along the way that we went. Therefore, we will also serve the Lord. Theirs was a loyalty based on history. Theirs was a gratitude based on abundance. It was a thanksgiving based on memory. And it's an inspiration for me as well today. I told you last week that tonight at the Thanksgiving banquet marks the 5-year anniversary of our time here at the church. And as I look back over the last 5 years, I'm struck by this story of gratitude and this story of abundance. And I want to share part of my story with you. For as I remember back over these last 5 years, I want to share with you 5 things I am thankful for at First Baptist Church. Now I could name 10 or 20 or 30, but 5 is a good, clean number, and it makes sense on this 5th anniversary. So, number 1, this church has a phenomenal staff. Now, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about the staff I get to work with day after day after day. You heard Dottie last week brag on the music staff, and we got to hear some of that again today, and absolutely is that true. To get to see the work of Jim and to get to hear the work of Jim and Evelyn and what they do is amazing. And it's a joy to be able to work with them on a consistent basis, to hear their creativity and their talent. Some of the folks that you may not see as often and may not know because of their work behind the scenes are just as amazing. I'm thankful for Holly. I'm thankful for Buddy and the work that they do as bookkeeper and custodian. The work that you probably don't see, but work that is pretty critical for the way that our church runs. Again, it is a blessing to be able to work with them. Over 5 years, I've had this incredible opportunity to work with some incredible ministry staff as well, even folks that have gone on. I'm thankful, of course, for Sandy and for my work with Patrick, my work with Meredith, the opportunity that I've had to work with these phenomenal folks. And now, the ministry staff that we share has been such a blessing. We have this pattern that we've moved into on Tuesdays, that we eat lunch together as we share the work and the words of the church. And it's kind of like just getting up on a surfboard and riding the wave because of this incredible amount of creativity and anticipation of what God is doing. And so I'm thankful for Joe. I'm thankful for Cheryl. I'm thankful for Cody. I'm thankful for Amelia and the opportunity that we have to work together. Now, some folks have asked sometimes, so in a Baptist church, who's really in charge? Is it the pastor? Is it the moderator? Is it the church in general? Well, if you've been around a Baptist church or this church for very long, you know the person that's really in charge is the office manager. There is no question who anybody goes to when they have a question, if they need to know what happened, if they need to know where the baskets for this morning's offering are. And you have an amazing one. You all should be blessed and know that you are blessed to be able to have Jenny Purvis here as office manager, somebody that truly is in charge of this church and is a blessing to work with. Thank you, and I'm thankful to God for the blessing of our staff. Number 2, I am thankful that our church gets missions. I have talked before about the 3 R's. That the way that we do missions needs to have this multiple approach. It needs to refill the coffers of those that do work. And I see that. I see that in our church, the way that we give sacrificially to missions offering. Also, we do the work of relieving those that are in our own midst and rolling up our sleeves and doing the work. And I see that. I see how hard we work. At Family Promise, the food pantry, at Link, doing the work of those in need. But I also see the work of reversing that 3rd R, asking the question, if there are these needs that continue to come year after year and generation after generation, what systems have created that problem? And so the work of the justice ministry has started to ask that very question. Our work in Haiti has said it begins with education, it begins with schools, not just fixing a Band-Aid solution. And this church gets it, gets the 3 R's. And with generosity, you give. With commitment, you work. And with foresight, you reverse the broken systems of our world, and I am proud to be a part of it. I'm proud to represent you as I stand in front of the denomination, as we're often one of the top givers. Proud to stand in front of the Habitat events or opportunities that we have as we do the work of Christ in this world, and proud to be one of the leading voices on the justice ministry, representing you because we get it. Thank you. Number 3, this church is one that is all right trying something new every once in a while. Actually, they do it fairly often. Thank you for your innovation. Thank you for the ways that you say God is doing a new thing and we are hopping on board. Whether it's the teaching model that we have embraced through spiritual formation and through that work. Whether it's the spiritual leadership team model. There's not another church that I know that does quite that model. Understanding how people volunteer, how people participate, how people work in the church today, and understanding that we must constantly and consistently be open to God's leading through prayer, through quietness, through listening, through discernment. These are models that not every church has the foresight or the guts to try. Thank you. Thank you for being willing to try new things. Number 4, our church is a church that likes to have fun. I recognize it from the very first search committee meetings 5 years ago, when we sat and laughed together in Hannah's house with Joanne Wilson and with others. I am thankful that this is a church that likes to have fun together, whether it's the the staff relations meeting in which half of us are in tears half of the meeting, or whether it's the finance committee meetings in which Travis Cooper's dry sense of humor has everybody in stitches, or whether it's the staff meetings in which we enjoy a meal and enjoy conversation together, or whether it's this dynamic. I don't know how many times at the end of the service, I go to the back of the door, and a handful of people leave, usually people that have to get to work or get kids to lunch or beat the Methodist to Free State. And then I just stand there because everybody else just stands and talks. There's nobody to come shake my hand because they're all talking with each other, telling stories, catching up on the week, having fun together. And it is one of my favorite moments of the week to stand and watch the fun happen. This is a church that knows how to have fun. And number 4, this is a church that trusts each other. I've had a lot of folks over these last 5 years say, man, you've been through a lot of stuff, a lot of things up and down, a lot of issues going on in the church, a lot of transition. How do you make it? How does your church make it through something like that? And my answer is the same every single time. I say, a church that can't trust each other will split over the color of the drapes in the parlor. But a church that trusts one another will hold together and pray together and work together even if they don't always agree. And through the midst of these 5 years, I have seen that happen. I've seen your trust for one another and your trust for your leadership. Now, of course, there's going to be some situations here and there, and there's going to be some people that don't always exhibit that trust. But for the most part, those people are the outliers. They're on the outside looking into a community that knows that God is not a God of closed fists. but a God of abundance, a God of open hands. And just like Joshua, reminding the Israelites as they moved into the next time in their lives, as we prepare now for 2015, I hope we do it again. Asking God, how can we be a people of abundance? Trusting in a God of abundance. And make the choice. For the choice stands in front of us today. Choose this day whom you will serve. Will you choose to serve the gods of scarcity? The gods that are so worried about, I don't know if we're going to have enough. Are we going to have enough money? Are we going to have enough people? Are we ever going to have any carpet? And you could listen to those voices and hoard and wring your hands and be afraid. Or you can listen to the voice of the God of abundance who says, I have taken care of you for 159 years and I just got started. As we move into a new year, as we look at what God is doing, as you in a few moments prepare to offer your pledge, do so with open hands, knowing that the God of abundance stands ready to use your generosity and to show us how to be generous for 160 more years and more. As we sing our final hymn together, I'm going to invite you to stay seated as we pass our baskets. This will be an opportunity for you to think about how indeed you will pledge, how indeed you will give in the coming year. As you do that, and as the baskets pass, may it be an act of worship. Perhaps you won't put a pledge in this morning, but I hope that you make it an act of worship. Symbolizing what you will do in the coming years, how God will use you in this church. Will you give your time? Will you give your prayers? Will you give your money? However, we together worship the God of abundance. We do so because we know that God has loved us and will love us still. Let us sing.